Hello, and welcome to another episode of Around the Verse, our weekly look at Star Citizen's ongoing development. I'm Sandy Gardner.
And I'm Chris Roberts.
Today is a holiday in the US, so our teams in Los Angeles and Austin are enjoying some much-deserved time off.
Yes, they definitely are.
Because of this, we don't have a feature for today's episode, but we do have some exciting news.
Yes, we do. That's right. As I'm sure you've heard, Alpha 3.0 has gone to a wider PTU, so we've gone beyond Evocate, Evocate, as you would say. So let's see when into getting the build ready for this expanded group of testers in this week's Burn Down.
Welcome back to Burn Down, our weekly show dedicated to reviewing the progress of the release of Star Citizen Alpha 3.0. In the past week, we've made tremendous progress towards the release of PTU as we've focused on the categories shopping, missions, ships and vehicles, traversal, mobiGlas, and overall performance and stability. So let's check in with the team to see how each progressed.
This week we did a review of the physical shops. From my standpoint, they are feature complete. Then we've been focusing on missions and getting the Item 2.0 ships completely set up. From tech design standpoint, we feel we're feature complete on that, except for one minor bug. And then from there, we're still working on the Item 2.0 HUD and combat indicators for those ships and getting that to feel right. And then we are doing a review of the commodities today, and ideally that is feature complete, and that will get turned to green. And from there, we will continue to basically focus on stability and performance. One of the things that we knocked out this week was a raycast issue that was causing memory crashes and overall performance issues. So ideally the Evocati see a gain in performance based off of that, but that's been plaguing us for a little while. So getting that thing knocked out was good. And then from there, it's just been general stability and performance issues that we've been focusing on. And then everything that the team's been working on is really been going towards those tier zeros that we've called out.
So this past week we had a review of the shop locations in 3.0 with Chris and Todd Pappy and all the other directors. We went through each shop, we experienced the shopping flow and experience, got to see the shopkeepers in action, and it went really, really well. There's a few bugs that we're still working through and to get fixed, but overall the shop locations are in a really good shape and ready to release in 3.0. So we're in bug fixing and polish mode now. And there's plenty of stuff still to do, lots of bugs to fix up, but we're ready to release these things live to you guys. So we're really, really excited about that.
So I've been going through commodity by commodity and setting the profit margin range. Each commodity has its own profit margin range that scales roughly with its base value, but it's not a linear relationship. So that's taken some time to go through and just making sure that there's never any one commodity that is always the best thing to trade, because that's what we don't want to see. We don't want players to get to a point where there's just one trade route that's the most lucrative and then that's it. And so a lot of my work the last day or two has been just making sure that we're in a good spot there.
So this past week, we got Miles Eckhart, one of the mission givers in 3.0, into QA's hands. So he's being run through his paces. The QA is kind of taking him through his flow, identifying issues and calling out blockers. Those tech blockers are being looked at by our developers and getting resolved at a good pace. And we have turned attention to Ruto as well and getting him all situated. Pretty soon we'll be able to get him into QA's hands as well. And so the mission givers are coming along pretty nicely. On the ship setup side, we've finally gotten the ships to a point where we have gotten them out to the Evocati and we're ready for them to really bang on them and test them in their full capacity. On the setup tasks this past week, we were able to knock out the headlights, getting all the headlights set up so that they actually work when you're going onto the dark side of a moon and you want to explore. The headlights will actually turn on now, and you can we're toying and tweaking with distance and brightness, but for the most part they're all set up now. We also got the beds in all the ships set up with the save game logout functionality, so that when you get into the bed, you can actually log out of the beds now and persist in that location. So we're really excited about that functionality, and that will be online in the live environment here pretty soon as well. We have a big spreadsheet full of the different ships and all the different setup features that we need to get implemented. And at the start of this endeavor, they were all red, all red cells, meaning they hadn't been done yet. And for the most part, we've got them all to green now. So we've got a nice, pretty green spreadsheet. Lots of things been accomplished this past week, and we're ready for lots of testing to be done on those ships.
So one of the things that we're looking to implement with 3.0 is persistent spawning. So one of the things that tech design are doing at the moment is going through all of the beds in game in the ships and adding an interaction point to those, so that the player, when they get into the bed, they can basically save their progress, and that will log them out as sleeping in the bed, basically. So what we've been doing at the moment is adding interaction points to every single one, setting them up in data, and basically saying when the player interacts with this specific point, we're telling them that this is where they're logging out, and that's where they'll remain until they log back in again.
For the 3.0 ship burn down, we've been making a lot of progress fixing bugs on ships, in particular the Caterpillar, the Glaive and Scythe, the 300 series, the Mustangs, the Aurora, and the Constellations, including fixing those bugs. We've been implementing new features such as the new bed interaction feature, which allows us to do the save and exit interaction on them. We've also implemented the new light feature, which allows us to have controllable lights, which gives us the ability to turn on headlights in the ships so we can see into the dark areas of the planets. And we're currently in the midst of doing a first pass on Item 2.0 items balance, so that we can do things like actually control the power plants and the shield generators and the weapons, and make meaningful choices when we're flying the ships and sliding those dials on the MFDs that we've just fine-tuned and are getting the features that you can control on those MFDs working.
So we have this ticket that says the ESP is broken. ESP is what helps you stay on your target when you're flying across space and you want to dogfights, and it helps you lock your pips so it's easier to land your shots. The ticket says that it's broken after quantum traveling, and so the ticket was first sent to Michael, who works on the Quantum Drive, and basically we took a look at it and figured that it doesn't really involve Quantum Drive at all. So I jumped in and tried to figure out if it was involved targeting. So, because targeting is what shows on the pips, and ESP is broken if your target is inaccurate. So, me and Michael were looking at it for a couple hours, and we've jumped all over around the universe. We locked onto different targets, both allies and enemies, and we can't figure out what's going on. And so we have a hard time even figuring out if it was working or not, or if it was on or off. And so we started looking at the code to see if you could turn the ESP on or off, and it turns out you can. So we followed that trail down. Turns out that the UI for ESP is broken, so it would always show that it was on. So we figured, so if we do this quick fix, at least it'll be accurate and show that it is on or if it's off. And so I put the fix in, and then we went back and flying around and locking onto different targets and tracking them. And we still can't figure it out. So we look back to what the ticket supplied, and it said that ESP is broken and had a 5-second video of just swinging back and forth against the target. And we spent a couple more hours, and we started feeling like if none of us can figure it out, and QA can't figure it out, then probably it was a user error, because the different keyboards that are involved in just playing this game, it might be possible that you hit and accidentally turned off ESP, the UI didn't update, and so you don't know that it's off, and then when you try to lock on and it's broken. So we put that fix in, and everything looks fine. We're sending it back. We'll see how it goes we'll see how the QA feels about it.
And many days I come in and there's a fire to put out. And today was no different. There was 6 major issues blocking us from releasing to the Evocati and eventually the PU. One of those issues was all the ships were missing their LODs, and the LODs are the level of detail meshes that as you get away from the ship, it goes lower resolution. What was happening was it was showing a very low resolution model up close, and then it would disappear as you went away from the camera. So we had a lot of missing assets, and you would usually think this was an art issue, but we know that these were working in the game not too long ago. So the fact that all 30 or 50 ships suddenly were missing these was very curious. So we started looking into the issue, and we thought, well, let's test this on our development build. Let's test it in the editor. And it was fine in the editor. It was fine in the development build. Then we went over to QA and asked them to look at it, and they noticed that it was only happening in the shipping build. Now, shipping build and development build where we work, it's a little different. There's a little different ways they build those processes, different flags that get set. Not as much information gets put in the shipping build because it's a little more streamlined. So we were looking at it, since we had isolated it only to the shipping build, we started looking at the data inside the shipping build, and we could tell that the build process had not put the correct files into our P4K pack files. So once we realized that, we contacted our DevOps engineer, Miles, and he was able to clear the cache and solve the problem.
This week we had quite an interesting set of tasks given to us by design, which started from just one bug which was related to basically headlights on a ship not working properly, which evolved into creating a new system of light grouping for headlights for every ship on 3.0 and in a future developments where players are actually able to control and toggle headlights or spotlights on their ships whenever you're in a dark area or you want to illuminate the surface of, let's say, an asteroid when you're looking for something, which is quite an interesting and a very, very strong visual, and it's something that was missing from ships before. So because it had to be done on every 3.0 ship, and every ship has its own separate task, it also actually resolves quite a big chunk, about 20, I would say, tasks on our to-do list before we are ready to push for a PTU. And it was quite a quick task. It literally took me about 1 hour to do. All you had to do is separate the headlights or the spotlights from the existing lightning rig into its own layer, assign a new light group just for them, and just tick a box which allowed players to use a shortcut to turn them on and off. I had to do it for every single ship, and just like that, about 20 tasks were done in a very, very short amount of time.
This week, we've been focused on getting things ready for when we go to PTU. Part of the big piece of this is updating our traversal experience, how ships fly and travel through our expanded universe. A big piece of this has been updating our navigation points for quantum travel, as well as doing a lot of fine-tuning on the atmospheric flight systems, as well as some of the more interesting flight systems that we have for vehicles like the Nox and the Dragonfly. Those will be really exciting to see in game, so look forward to that. But this has come with another challenge, and that is making sure that we have the performance that our fans expect. So we've had our lead engineers, Chad McKinney and Mark Aben, working on performance-related issues in order to bring that experience up to the high fidelity and high speed that we hope to see in the finished product.
For the Quantum Drive, we've been working on a lot of visual effects work recently. So we've took the old system, which was using a different set of triggers and such. It was basically state-driven. Every time we entered a new state of the drive, the spool, the ramp, the travel, we would just say, okay, fire off these effects. That took a lot of a lot of the control away from design on how they wanted it to behave. So we've instead changed it to a velocity-based system. So now instead of it being this effect plays when we enter this effect or this stage of the drive, so spool up, play this effect, it's now when the ship reaches this velocity, play this effect. It gives designers a lot more control over how the visuals are going to look and gives our artists more control over how things develop through the flow, as well as controlling our short and long range travel. We also implemented our dynamic nav points, so the inner nav network around a planet is no longer has to be placed by our designers. It can be generated dynamically and controlled based on what you're actively targeting, so it doesn't flood the player's screen with all kinds of useless data. If they don't want it, they can drop their quantum target, they'll go away, have combat, and then bring it back up whenever you need to. Those have been the big things we've been pushing for this past week or so for 3.0.
So in the last week, I've closed out a lot of issues with the help of John to do with Graveler being quite unstable. So things like, for example, the Graveler bikes flipping upside down and getting stuck in the geometry and just not being able to right themselves. So now they can fix that problem without much issue. We've also had things like strange forces that just come out of nowhere and kick Graveler bikes up into space, I guess. So those have been resolved as well. And general sort of issues where Graveler bikes lose control. We had one issue where you would turn left, specifically left, and the Graveler bike would tumble and then carry on. If you tried to go right, it wouldn't happen, which is a bit strange. We fixed that issue as well. We still haven't quite got it yet, but we're also looking into issues where there are these huge forces that occur whenever you drive a Graveler bike up to a big rock, and Graveler just panics and goes, oh no, you're going to hit the rock, and it just flings you up into space. So that's been sort of limited. And I think with that issue and with the atmospheric stuff that John's been working on, where you get this turbulence that I mentioned earlier, just making sure that they all work together and there's no other issues on top of that. And pretty much at that point we're PTU ready with this. This is ready to go and it feels a lot nicer than it used to.
Okay, so I was investigating a PTU bug where as players are flying around the PU, new objects were not rendering in. It was just basically missing from all the locations that you visited. The issue was that the streaming system was essentially stuck, so as new objects were requested to stream in, they were not getting updated and therefore they were not getting loaded and not getting rendered. To resolve the issue, we first had to gather the some information from the Evocati and QA, where we basically exposed some debug streaming information into the release builds so that we could essentially see what kind of issue was happening with the streaming system. Was it stuck? Was it running out of memory? Was it over budget? That sort of thing. Once we got that information, we realized that essentially the streaming system was stuck, and then as new objects came in, they were not getting updated, it wasn't going over budget, it was just not getting updated. And to resolve this issue, we essentially found the cause was that the streaming system relied on a check to update every 0.1 milliseconds, and as you were connected to the server, it was storing that value in a float, which after a while it lost precision, and so it couldn't represent 0.1 milliseconds anymore, and therefore it never got into the block to update the importance value of the objects, and it never got streamed in. And basically to resolve it, we changed that timer check to work on a frame delta time rather than server absolute time. It was just looking at the difference, how much time has passed since the last frame, and that resolved the streaming system bug.
I am primarily working on hooking up the radar gameplay and the scanning gameplay to the UI and the MFDs and the visor interface that will let you know that you are radar and scanning gameplaying. Like that, when that it happens at all. Because the underlying mechanic is that is a location versus another location versus the ambient signal between versus what you're doing and what they're doing, all of which is basically invisible until we put it on a screen and says it happened or it didn't. And so part of it is getting readouts from the things you're scanning and reporting that information on screen in a way that makes sense and is generic enough that we can use it for debris or a vehicle or a planet or a jump point or whatever else, to the point where we'll want to be able to extend this to being able for like police scanners to scan the ship and its cargo and its crew, and have the feedback on that go over time and let everybody know that it's even happening. So that's once you have that information, the part of it is displaying it. The other part is the gameplay of getting it, of manipulating your scanner to focus in on one part of space or to expand out to get a more broad sweep of the area. And so all the controls to manipulate that and to demonstrate to you what it is you're doing when you push buttons and gameplay happens that's what we're doing.
We find multiple challenges with displaying information to the player. Right now, all of the ships have their own kind of display systems, and we're adding a new one, basically for scanning and trying to locate other players. This is a challenge because we don't want to clutter the players with too much information. We want to make it basically the essential for the player to, if they want to scan something, they can easily do it, and they can get all of the information in a simple and clear way to make them make better decisions, react faster, just basically make gameplay more fun for them.
So last week we had a few more polish tasks left for the star map. These have been done. So the star map is basically PTU ready. There is one more task I need to submit. We're not submitting right now to prevent any instability for the first PTU release, but it will probably be submitted for the next patch after that. On the radar to the star map to radar conversion, I've been able to get some more work done. We have now a nice transition between the star map and the radar, so if you zoom in and zoom out, it will all go smoothly. I'm going to get like a video together today and show it to the team to get some feedback and see where we go from there.
In regards to the raycast issue that the programming team took care of, it took roughly a day and a half of all the senior engineering programmers here in Frankfurt to track that sucker down and kill it.
So the mission manager, that's been PTU ready for about 2 or 3 weeks. This last week, Todd again reviewed it with some of the other designers. They've identified the last few fixes that they'd like. So right now we're in the process of estimating those out, getting them into schedule, and then we'll see where that falls for getting to the last few fixes before we go to 3.0 live.
I think we've got everyone. We're going to start the live sync. So, you want to take it away, Mr. Webster?
Firstly, we pushed to Ivocati on Friday and again on Saturday, which is pretty good. We got a feedback report from Will Leverett that QA responded to in the last sort of hour or so, highlighting the bugs that that Will called out in there for the ships. The server stability, I'm just trying to take a look at it now. For the most part, it seemed not too bad. I couldn't see anything in there that highlighted anything particularly dreadful. But of course, we can ask the guys in the meeting in a little bit. Other than that, the main things to sort of highlight were there's a couple of bugs that we already know that we've got that are being taken a look at, where if ships go into a green zone, they sort of stutter around a little bit.
Well, look, let's look at the bugs. We need to push the PTU tonight, even with some of these issues, because we need to get our service statistics for tomorrow. To Ivocati, sorry, yes. So we will go live in Ivocati, so we can find and fix some of these issues before we do that. And then whatever happens, we need to go because we need to get the statistics from the server, so we have the information. So if we do fix the other issues tomorrow, we know whether we're going to have a nice stable server for everyone to a larger PTU.
Performance-wise, we've been doing lots of in-tests in increasing player count. So externally, we got up to 60 players in an instance, so that was really, really cool to see. We've got lots of cool images of Port Olisar and all the ships flying around. It's really, really interesting to see the different, how even just an increasing player cap like that can make it feel a lot more lived in, a lot more exciting. And internally, we actually even got up to 128 players. So we're doing lots of tests to try to increase player cap, and it's going really well so far.
So we're winding down with the 3.0 release right now, and that means that some of the things that we're looking at are stability and performance. And this is something that we're always concerned with, but when we're really approaching a release, they become higher in priority. And these are two kind of broad topics. Stability is something that, like I said, we're always addressing, but we've been fixing the obvious crashes, we've been fixing the obvious bugs and disconnections, and now we're getting to a point where we've gotten through most of the major issues and we're left with either very difficult to solve crashes or very difficult to reproduce. And so oftentimes I'll get some report from the Evocati, and it will be that one time during an Evocati run there was a crash on the server for some reason or a disconnection. And I get a call stack, I get a core dump, and there's no repro. We've only seen it once, and we need to fix it somehow. And this has come up many times. I have to look at these kinds of issues and just try to figure out how it is even possible that, say, the server can get in a particular state and how to fix it without ever seeing the crash. And so this requires a lot of collaboration, for instance, with QA to get certain kinds of information, working with Evocati so that we can try a fix that may not hold and kind of go back and forth until we get something that looks like it's working. And it's an ongoing process, and this is the kind of thing where having the Evocati is incredibly useful because it means that we can test at a scale that we're just not able to achieve internally. So that's one big kind of set of things that we're looking at right now.
One of the few things that we've been trying to do hard on 3.0 is optimization, optimization, optimization. You know, we have bigger maps, gigantic maps, a lot more players, and unfortunately a lot of our older systems ran these updates all the time, which means if we throw in 60 ships, that's 60 big, gigantic IFCF updates, which are heavy physical beasts that eat up all that yummy, yummy CPU power. And obviously, if you have a ship way down there, you don't care about him. You only care about the ships that are nearby that you're combating or with your buddies, so we only want to update just those things. And I put in something, it was actually during Bug Smashers, to only show those ships that are nearby. Unfortunately, that had a knock-on side effect where on the server, if you had an AI guy over here, he wouldn't update and he couldn't handle the mission. So if you go fly over, he would eventually tick on and then teleport away and it would cause havoc. So I had to build upon that optimization so that it wasn't just in range, but if you detected him on the sensor or for, on the dedicated server, if it was a mission critical thing, he should do an update. So now we only update the things we should update unless the server needs to do those special little things, and woo, performance, and we get our fun CPU cycles. One of the other things we're doing on optimization is we're trying to get rid of a lot of our old systems. There was this thing called net serialize. This is basically the old way of the CryEngine to serialize a bunch of data. You basically had this function, it had a block of information, and you filled it all out, but it doesn't work well with our new system called serialized variables. The new way is multi-threaded, work it in a batch, all the great new stuff of the day. Net serialize, main thread, horrible flow setup. So we're trying to rip out that last thing. We only had 3 things left that used it. We ripped out 2, and we actually have a 3rd one getting worked on right now, so hopefully we could just toss away that old system and use that awesome new serialized variable flow, and I think Clive will be very, very happy once we finish that off.
So performance has gotten much better as of late. We've managed to increase the average frame rate in many places, even really busy places like Grimex and Levski. But we've managed to get more people in now, more clients in at the same time. We went to Evocati with over 40 people not long ago. We've even run local tests using what we call headless clients, which is kind of what it sounds. It's basically just an automated way of connecting a client. And we actually had, I think it was about 10 or 12 PCs that we had, each one running about 7 to 10 headless clients, and we managed to connect over 100 players. I'm not sure of the exact number, but managed to get over 100 people in at the same time with stability. There's an actual stable server with that many people in, so that was really exciting for us to hit that. General performance is better, even localized. As I say, we've gone through periods of time where the frame rate has been sub 30, which is when QA tends to get worried. That's when we will start throwing bugs in if we're seeing an average kind of FPS below 30 in any area. And yet almost all of those areas are now pushing well over 30 into the mid 40s, high 50s. It's much better performance throughout.
Our priorities at the moment are to get a build that is stable but also has good playtime features. So we're focusing on flight and traversal, planetary stuff, landing, missions, shopping, just to make sure all these are functioning to get out to a PTU push in the hopes that it's a good experience when we do go to PTU.
As you may recall, last week our production schedule showed we were at 179 remaining must-fix issues towards the release of PTU across all categories. I'm thrilled to say that the result of all the hard work by the team is that we've burned down enough issues to push 3.0 to PTU to start a larger round of testing. Now from here, we'll be releasing updates to more and more PTU testers until we feel thorough improvements have been completed. Then 3.0 will be released live. Now don't forget to check out our production schedule on Friday to see the progress we're continuing to make. And see you next week here on Burndown.
While there's no feature today, we do have some very special video content coming your way. Our anniversary special starts tomorrow, and to celebrate the sale, we've recorded 8 episodes of Around the Verse to profile all the ship and vehicle manufacturers in-game and include a few surprises.
Yes, there'll be a few surprises, so be sure to check out our website each and every day over the next week so you don't miss an installment of the series or your chance to pick up a ship that's not normally available.
Yes, that is right. And thanks to all of our subscribers and backers for your support. We couldn't do any of this without you.
Yes, we definitely couldn't, so thank you very much. And for those of you in the United States, happy Thanksgiving to those celebrating. And thanks to our dedicated testers out there playing the latest build and getting it closer to everyone's hands in 3.0 live.
Yes, thank you. And until tomorrow, we will see you
Around the Verse.